At 91 years old, Michael Caine sat calmly in the studio chair, his signature glasses catching the soft studio lights. The cameras rolled, the audience fell silent, and the host of US Insight leaned forward with a smile that carried both respect and curiosity. "Sir Michael," she began, "you've inspired generations, not just with your acting, but with your wisdom. What's the biggest lesson life has taught you?" Caine chuckled softly, a sound warm and grounded. "Well," he said, "I've learned that success means nothing if you forget to be kind. I've met people at the top of the world who were miserable because they thought kindness made them weak. But kindness is the strongest thing you can be." That single line seemed to hang in the air. Even the cameramen paused, nodding quietly. The host smiled. "You've had an extraordinary career, over 70 years in film, 2 Oscars, countless memorable roles. Yet you've always seemed humble." Caine leaned back, looking thoughtful. "That's because I remember where I came from. I grew up poor in South London. My dad was a fish market porter. We had nothing, but we had pride. So when fame came along, I treated it like a guest, one that could leave any moment. I never wanted to become a man who bowed to applause." The audience clapped softly. Then, the host asked something unexpected. "You've often spoken about failure. What's your philosophy on it?" Michael's eyes twinkled. Failure," he said. "That's my favorite teacher. You see, I was fired from my first theater job. I was told I'd never make it because of my accent. But I didn't try to change it. I made it my strength. So every time I failed, I learned something, about resilience, about myself, about people. You don't grow when everything's perfect. You grow when everything's falling apart and you choose to stand tall anyway." He paused, then added, "There's a line I like to say, if you fall down, pick something up while you're down there. Learn something before you stand back up." The studio filled with quiet admiration. The host leaned forward. "You've also spoken about love, especially your marriage. What's the secret?" Caine smiled, and his entire face softened. "My wife, Shakira, saved my life," he said sincerely. "Before her, I drank too much, I worked too much, I cared too much about what people thought. But she brought peace into my life. The secret: choose someone who makes you a better version of yourself. Someone who challenges you, not flatters you." The host nodded. "That's beautiful. And," Caine added, grinning, "don't forget to laugh. We've been married 50 years because we laugh every day. That's more powerful than any diamond ring." The next question took a more serious turn. "You recently announced your retirement from acting. How do you feel about closing this chapter?" For a moment, the great actor looked distant. Then he smiled again, almost serenely. "You don't stop being an artist when you stop performing. I've spent my life telling stories. Now, I want to live the rest of my story. I have grandchildren. I want to see the world not through a camera lens, but through their eyes." He took a slow breath. "You see, people fear endings. But life's not about how many roles you play, it's about how well you play your final one. I'm proud of mine." The crowd applauded, some even wiping tears. The host then asked, "If you could give one message to young people watching today, one piece of advice, what would it be?" Michael Caine looked directly into the camera. His voice softened, but his words carried the weight of a lifetime. "Never chase fame. Chase purpose. Don't try to be somebody, try to do something. Because when the lights go out and the audience goes home, what's left is what you've given to others. That's what lasts." A hush fell over the studio. The host, visibly moved, said, "That's extraordinary. Do you think about legacy often?" Caine smiled wistfully. "Legacy isn't about statues or awards. It's about memories. I want people to remember how I made them feel, not just on screen, but in life. That's the only kind of immortality I believe in." As the interview neared its end, the host thanked him for his time. But Michael wasn't finished. He leaned closer to the mic and said, "And one more thing. To anyone struggling right now, remember, it's never too late to start again. I didn't get my first big movie role until I was nearly 30. I was ready to give up, but I didn't. Life can surprise you, if you stay open to it." The audience erupted into applause, not the kind for a celebrity, but for a man who had spoken straight from the heart. As the cameras faded out, Michael Caine shook the host's hand and whispered something off mic. "The world doesn't need more stars, it needs more light." Later that evening, clips of the interview spread across social media. Viewers from around the world called it the most inspiring thing they'd heard all year. And somewhere, in a quiet home in Surrey, Sir Michael Caine sat with a cup of tea beside his wife, smiling as he watched the replay. Not as an actor, but as a man who had truly lived, and who, in sharing his truth, had reminded the world how to live too. The next morning, US Insight released the full version of the interview online. Within hours, it began trending worldwide. Millions of viewers commented that Michael Caine's words had touched their souls. Schools played clips in classrooms, young actors shared his advice, even CEOs quoted him on resilience and humility. But what people didn't see was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The studio crew had gathered around Michael, each person wanting to shake his hand. One young production assistant, barely in her 20s, approached nervously. "Sir Michael," she said, "I'm studying acting, but everyone tells me it's impossible. I'm not rich, I don't have connections, maybe I should just quit." Caine looked at her kindly. "Do you love it?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Then don't quit," he said firmly. "If you love something enough, the world will eventually notice. It might not be today or tomorrow, but one day someone will see you, really see you. That's how it happened for me." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir," he smiled. "Don't thank me. Thank your dream, it's what keeps you alive." Later, as Michael was being driven back to his London home, the journalist riding along asked if he ever imagined becoming such a voice of wisdom for others. Michael laughed softly. "Not at all. When I was young, I didn't even think I'd live this long. I was reckless, always chasing something. But with time, I realized the chase never ends. Peace only comes when you stop running and start appreciating." The journalist looked at him curiously. "So what brings you peace now?" Michael gazed out of the window, watching the trees rush by. "Silence," he said after a pause. "Silence, and gratitude. Every morning when I wake up and see my wife beside me, I think, you lucky old fool, you've had a good life." That answer would later become one of the most quoted lines from the extended interview. A few days later, US Insight invited Michael back, not for another interview, but for a special roundtable with young actors. It was a small group, 5 aspiring performers, each eager to learn from a legend. They sat in a semicircle, eyes wide with admiration. "Let's talk honestly," Michael began. "You all want to be famous, don't you?" Some nodded shyly. He grinned. "That's all right. I did too. But let me tell you something, fame is like a shadow. It disappears when the light changes. So if you chase the shadow, you'll always be lost. Instead, build something real, skill, patience, integrity. Those don't fade." One actor asked, "But how do we handle rejection?" "It hurts." Caine nodded knowingly. "Of course it hurts. I was rejected for years. There were times I couldn't afford rent, times I cried myself to sleep. But every no taught me one thing: I had to get better. Rejection doesn't mean you're not good, it means you're not ready yet." He leaned forward and added with a wink, "And if they don't see your worth, make them regret it later." The room erupted in laughter. Then another student, a quiet boy, asked, "Sir Michael, you've played heroes, villains, kings, and butlers. Which role was your favorite?" Caine thought for a long moment. "My favorite role," he repeated, "being myself. Because it took me a lifetime to figure out who that was." The young actors sat silently, taking in the weight of those words. Later, as they wrapped up, Michael shared one last story, one that had never been told publicly before. "When I was young," he began, "my mother told me something I never forgot. She said, 'Son, if you ever become famous, don't forget the people who clean the floor beneath your feet.' And you know what? She was right. Every person matters. The moment you think you're better than someone, that's the moment you start to fall." A young woman whispered, "That's beautiful." He smiled softly. "It's true. I've seen brilliant actors destroy themselves because they forgot where they came from. But the greatest strength you'll ever have is humility." When the roundtable ended, the students lined up to hug him. One said, "You've changed how I see my future." Michael replied gently, "Good. Then I've done my job." That evening, Michael returned home, where Shakira greeted him with tea and a warm smile. She asked, "How was the talk?" He laughed. "I think I might have inspired a few kids today." She squeezed his hand. You always do. He looked at her for a long moment and said softly, "You know, love, I think that's the best role I've ever played, not in the movies but in life." She laughed. "And I think you've played it perfectly." Days later, US Insight aired the extended segment under the title, Michael Caine, The Art of Living. It became one of the most watched interviews in the program's history. People all over the world shared it, calling it the most heartwarming farewell from a legend. And as the final clip played, the one where he said, "The world doesn't need more stars, it needs more light," viewers everywhere stood still, reflecting on their own lives. For many, it wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a message. A reminder that greatness isn't about standing in the spotlight, it's about helping others find theirs. And as the credits rolled, Sir Michael Caine's words lingered in millions of hearts, timeless, humble, and profoundly true.